Hey everybody, welcome back to Graymalkin Lane. I am your host, Chad Anderson. This is the podcast where queer friends and allies gather to review and discuss the original X-Men comics from the 1960s. Last week, we covered X-Men number 16, which concluded the big battle with the Sentinels. Master Mold was destroyed, but only because Bolivar Trask sacrificed himself to do so, and the big Sentinel base was blown up. Some of the X-Men were injured. Professor X gathered a giant crystal that shut a bunch of Sentinels down. There was some crazy stuff that happened, but we had a really good time. So we're thrilled to be back today for X-Men 17, which directly continues from the last issue, beginning with some of the X-Men being injured in the last battle. So again, we're seeing more and more of the continuity as the issues continue into each other more directly. I am thrilled to be joined again by Day Spring from Power of X-Men and Patrick from Never Ending X-Men. Is that the what's your handle on Instagram, Patrick?
Yeah, you got it. Never Ending X-Men.
Just making sure I had it right. And Rowan is with us for the first time from the It Slays podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you guys here. Let's have you each introduce yourselves. Feel free to tell us all about your work. Let us hear your gender pronouns. And the question I'll have us each start with today is, tell us some scary movies that gave you nightmares as a kid.
All right, so my name is Dayspring, and I am the host of the Power of X-Men podcast. And it's a podcast that focuses strictly on X-Men. We highlight creators, writers, actors, cosplayers. We have an Instagram community going on, so check us out at Power of X-Men. We have some really great interviews coming up. We just wrapped an interview with Matt Rosenberg, who wrote Uncanny and Phoenix Resurrection. And I'm sorry to say 75% of that interview is me just asking Jean Grey questions. So, but we also have Ryan Penagos, aka Agent M, Dan Bondrak, who is the Ultimate Alliance director, Kelly Thompson coming up, and Tyler Main, who was Sabretooth in X1. So lots of great stuff coming down on the podcast. My pronouns are he, him. And what scary movies scared me as a child? So I was always afraid of scary movies. I always loved Jaws, but I think that's more thriller than scary movie. But I was scared of every movie, but one movie in particular, and I love horror now, sidebar, I love horror movies now, but one movie in particular was Poltergeist. And I think it was all because of that lore behind the movie, behind the scenes with Heather O'Rourke. I'm forgetting her name, but Carol Ann, and how she got sick and how the movie was cursed. So I was particularly terrified of Poltergeist.
Poltergeist, nice.
I'm an 80s baby. So I have to check out your podcast.
That's right.
Rowan, go ahead.
So I am Rowan. I am one of the hosts of the It Slays podcast. We are a horror movie review podcast based out of Canada. My pronouns are he and him. And I'm trying to think movies that used to scare me. I was a bizarre child that I didn't have much. I was raised on horror movies. So one that always got me was like the TV adaptation of It with Tim Curry. Tim Curry always used to scare me. And I don't know why, but yeah, he always used to do it for me. Nightmares for days. And other than that, maybe Leprechaun. Leprechaun always kind of got me. I don't know if it was that he was actually scary or he was just like a certified creep, but yeah, those two always did it for me when I was a kid.
Why is the It TV movie with Tim Curry far more scarier than the new movie? I don't know why.
There's just something about Tim Curry. He's got that presence. It's that unnerving presence.
That big Tim Curry energy.
Yes, that we love him for so much.
And then Patrick, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Patrick. My pronouns are he, him. I run the Never Ending X-Men Instagram, as Chad mentioned already. Over there, I'm reading every X-Men comic ever, started with the Claremont stuff and went all the way up through the 90s. Then I bounced back to the 60s with the original Lee and Kirby stuff, which, as I mentioned last time, has been a bit of a chore, but making my way through it, working back to continue my journey through the 90s. Outside of that, I also co-host a podcast called Every Horror Movie on Netflix, where we are indeed watching, reviewing, and discussing every horror movie on Netflix. We've had Rowan on the show once actually to discuss every Halloween movie ever with us, which was a lot of fun.
No, it's Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's right. You did Nightmare on Elm Street with us. I forgot. We've done a few of those franchise reviews. It's always it's always a journey. And as far as scary movies that scared me when I was a child, this is going to be really sad. I had a pretty sheltered childhood. So the first movie that I can remember being really scared of was Peter Pan. The like crocodile with the clock ticking inside him just horrified me, and I didn't want to watch it. And then the first like actual horror movie that scared me was not one I actually watched. I was just really terrified by the poster for Hannibal when it came out. And I don't know why, there was just something about this sort of creepy picture of Anthony Hopkins with his eye like all red that just terrified me. And we would drive past Blockbuster and I would like cry and not want to look at Blockbuster or go in because I was so scared of this damn poster. So it's very ironic because now I watch like multiple horror movies a week and it takes a lot to scare me. So I don't really know what changed exactly, but something did.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to piggyback off what you were saying about the crocodile in Peter Pan with like the the clock in him. I mean, it's just so I've thought about that over the years because it terrified me too as a child. And
good.
I think it's that idea that like death is right there and your time is up at any moment. And I think that's what I kind of as a child responded to because that was terrifying. I was on like my abuela's house on Calle Ocho and she would play Peter Pan thinking me and my primo would enjoy it. And no, I was terrified about that too.
And my name is Chad. I use he, him pronouns. When I was a kid, I walked in on, I must have been 5 or 6, on my sister and her friends watching Poltergeist. And that girl, I only probably saw 5 minutes, but that girl being trapped in the TV static scared the shit out of me for years. And somehow it turned into me thinking that ghosts lived in my mom's closet. So I would never go in my mom's closet for like 5 years. I think the show that gave me the most nightmares as a child, though, was Unsolved Mysteries. Do you guys remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
That like theme song, like that theme song would come on, and I would like make sure all the doors were locked and the windows were barred, and like I would watch, and then I would have nightmares for 3 days, and I would still watch it every week. I don't know what it was about that show.
It's rebooted now on Netflix or revived on Netflix. It's really good. I like the episodes I saw.
I'm not so scared anymore. Like I can watch The Walking Dead and, like I enjoy anything that's well done. But so the reason we asked this question, the X-Men delved into, in the first Juggernaut issue, we had kind of a suspense build in the comic. But in this comic, we have kind of a horror bend, 1960s style. So it's really fun to have some horror podcasters on the show. My husband and I have a running joke. Whenever we hear the word horror, we just say the word horror instead. And I'm going to avoid cracking that joke at all times. So when someone says, I love horror, and I'm like, oh, you love horrors? Because that's just a joke that always plays in our house. But I'm going to avoid cracking that for the rest of the podcast. My co-host Heather could not be here today. She had a work commitment. So for the first time, we have 4 dudes. It's almost like the X-Men. We just need our Gene on the side. So let's begin today. We have X-Men number 17 called And None Shall Survive. We're getting near the end of Stan and Jack's run. Roy Thomas is going to be taking over in just a couple of issues. This was published in February of 1966. And let's begin just getting some of your thoughts on the cover of X-Men 17. What were some of your thoughts?
It really stands out because it's monochrome. You don't get that often at this point in comics. So it caught my eye.
Yeah, it visually catches your eye. But after reading the issue, I didn't know what to expect. And I don't want to spoil the ending just yet, but I was just like, really, that was it? Like kind of melodramatic there. But I get it. It's a very suspenseful issue. You don't know what's happening. Although when you look back on it, you're like, yeah, pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, obviously the monochrome really stands out. This is always kind of interesting, like personal issue for me because I was a very late comer to the X-Men as a comic reader, And this was actually one of the very first early issues I ever like purchased. And I've always loved the cover, but I do agree it's very different on the inside.
There's a couple of modern comics, Deadpool and Carnage, Red, White, and Blood, where I think there's a Wolverine one too, right? So what you just get this, like, they're only using black, white, and red in the comic book. So this is kind of a start with that. It is a scary cover considering like 60s teens. You've got this long shadow. The X-Men are all in shambles. Professor X's wheelchair's tipped over. He's looking all helpless. I immediately got the song Roxanne in my head. Put on a red light. That's the way my brain works. But it's kind of an ominous cover. I think it's very effective.
Coupled with the fact that, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, please.
Coupled with the fact the copy reads, "You must not reveal the incredible to ending to any living soul!" Exclamation point. And remember, we'll be watching you. Like,
now we're gonna presume that everyone has read this issue or will be reading. So I'm not gonna save the big surprise reveal to the end. Okay. We're just going to say it out loud now. The big secret villain at the end of this issue is a returned Magneto, which is not surprising for us now because we've read 1,000 Magneto stories. But in the 60s, he was taken into outer space by the Stranger half a dozen issues ago, which would have been about a year in publication history. There's no internet back then. So we just saw Magneto and Toad get yanked into space, and they've been gone for a long time. So for a lot of fans, this was probably pretty surprising at the time, seeing the big reveal. So we're just going to reveal that right at the start of the episode. The enemy, the big surprise splash page reveal at the end of this issue is Magneto back to fight the X-Men again. You guys big Magneto fans?
Oh yeah, just not this era.
Yeah. I was going to say any Magneto that Stanley didn't write, I'd probably get down with. I'm throwing the shade out already.
What's your favorite Magneto story?
Oh, geez. I usually have an affinity for kind of, the Bronze Age, but I will say I really enjoyed, what would it probably, geez, I'm getting old. It must have been 7, 8 years now when they kind of gave him his own title, I think with like the Marvel Now relaunch.
Yeah, he had the shaped head.
Yeah, and I did really enjoy that. How it was kind of like this detective noir feel. I always like, just interesting. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't take on characters.
Yeah, that Cullen Bunn series, he wrote that series, was a fantastic read. I think my favorite, I'm going back to when I would read in the early years, when Magneto first took over for Xavier after he went into space, and he kind of led the X-Men and the New Mutants for a while. I remember being so stunned by that as I read that. It was such a bold character decision at the time. I also really loved him in when he ran Avalon. When they had this space station and he kind of created his little nation for mutants up there. It's a bold story that I really loved.
I really loved that Rick Remender story he did for him in Uncanny X-Force, where he comes to Wolverine and he's like, "I need you to do something for me." And Wolverine's like, "Why don't you just do it yourself?" And he like gives Wolverine like a little sheet of paper and he realizes it's a Nazi that probably tormented him in the camps. And it just, that panel of Magneto looking like he's about to cry, telling Wolverine, "Please, you need to do this for me," I thought just added so much depth to that character. Yeah. But I also love Age of Apocalypse. Like, I love Age of Apocalypse Magneto so much. Although that ending, when like the world is ending and he's holding his wife Rogue and his son Charles, and he's here like, "And I only have Charles Xavier to thank for my beautiful life," and everything's going like a nuclear bomb is going off. I'm not thinking of Charles Xavier with my. It's the only thing that took me out. But
Patrick, did you have a favorite?
I have a few. So this one is kind of silly, I guess, but I really love the era of New Mutants where Magneto is the headmaster to the New Mutants, and the new Mutants, which I apparently can't pronounce, just walk over him every fucking issue. Like, they just treat him like an absolute doormat, and it's just always like Magneto kind of like sitting back at the mansion, like wringing his hands about, how to be a better parent, basically, to the New Mutants. There's a lot of humanity to that, and also just a lot of comedy to the way that happens every goddamn issue. This is kind of recency bias because I did read it within the last few months, but I really enjoy the issue. I don't know what number it is, but in the Savage Land, it's towards the end of Claremont's run where Magneto really kind of makes the turn back towards being a heel again. And obviously, I'm not a big fan of that transition in the character, but Claremont makes it feel so real and so motivated and makes you feel the trauma and sort of the exhaustion that he's gone through that leads him back to that point. And I really admired the work that Claremont put into that, from what I understand, very editorially forced character development.
He's an incredibly complicated character, maybe the most complicated in the X-Men mythos, really. He's megalomaniacal. In this issue, we have him ranting about wanting slaves of mutants. I think that comes up actually next issue. He wants to enslave mutant kind. He's messing with people, but we also have this very softer kind of trauma side where we like appeal to him. He's a crazy villain who murders people, but then he's like this very sympathetic, soft-handed character at other times. He's complex. He's a difficult one to wrap your brain around, depending on who's writing him. But Stan Lee loves to write his crazy, insane, ranting villains back in the 60s. We have Doctor Doom and the Mandarin and all these villains who just like, rah, it's shaking their fists at the sky as they try these ridiculous plots over and over again, which is certainly how Magneto comes across here. So as we jump into the issue, we have the X-Men being taken care of a little bit. The Sentinel base has been destroyed. The military has rushed in to offer some aid, and we see a little bit of consequence taking place. Beast has a broken foot, it appears. Iceman is wounded, although we're not really sure why, but he's very, very affected and almost sinking into a coma. Cyclops is hurt. Angel and Jean are kind of getting taken care of a little bit as well. We have Professor X pretending not to know them, where he's just like, oh, I can't let anybody know that I know these people, otherwise I'll be associated with them, which we do a lot of queer identity exploration in Graymalkin. There's this idea of like, oh, I know those gay people, but I'm not gay, so I'm going to pretend not to know them so that nobody will know that I'm secretly gay. I'll pretend to be straight, but those guys, they're okay, right? Like it's there's almost a bizarre twist there. What did you guys think of these first couple pages? What stood out to you?
There's Professor X does a lot of thought bubbling about preserving his identity, which is one of the more ludicrous elements of early X-Men, is just that they're trying to conduct this farce that he's not actually a mutant and just is a normal teacher. There was a lot of I love and love to hate the amount of internal monologue that happens in this era of comics.
There's so many words on these pages.
Yes. So many. That scene with Iceman where Xavier is thinking he's having that internal monologue saying that like, oh, his injuries are more serious than I thought. I'm like, you're his professor. You have access to his medical history, and him being in ice form is probably not helping. And what was the excuse? Like, you can't drop your ice form because your secret identity can't be revealed. And like, I remember that issue. I don't know if it was like an X-Men First Class issue or maybe Ultimate X-Men, but where Iceman and Spider-Man are together and Iceman drops his like ice form and he's like, I'm actually Bobby Drake. And Spider-Man's like, who? So I just can't help thinking of that here too. It's like, who cares if they find out who he is? I mean, I get it. You don't want the media to know, but I just thought, again, another douchey move from Xavier. Like, your students are injured. You're making them keep their ice form, their masks on. You, as their instructor, probably have their medical history, something that can help the doctors and save their lives. Yet he's being so insistent on keeping their identity safeguarded. I think this idea of weaponizing youth is terrible.
We later learn if Iceman is wounded in his ice form and he changes back to human, he like heals up pretty nicely, right? Like that's kind of like he can be shattered into pieces and put himself back together.
I'm pretty sure that was Emma Frost who taught him that lesson. Emma Frost, who should have been teaching the X-Men since day one, although she was probably their same age.
Yeah, she's like a teenager here in this era. But he doesn't know that at this time, right? Like, he's in the hospital, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Beast on page 1, where he's like adoring his toes and calling them virtually priceless, is my favorite thing about Beast in this whole issue. And he gets real awful in a while, but he's adorable on page 1. As we move through this, we see the military kind of recognizing maybe mutants aren't so bad. Look, they helped us out here. And Xavier kind of arrogantly thinking, because he's kind to us, I'm going to release this military general from the mental hold I was putting on him, which is again, ethics of telepathy. We've talked about that in the trial of Professor X, but it's problematic at the very least as he's trying to protect their identities. What are your thoughts on the military's interactions with the X-Men, if any?
I mean, I was gonna say, I think his interactions are about as good as his interaction with the doctors later on, where I mean, and not to harp on Stan Lee's writing, but I'm like, no one's buying any of this facade that Xavier is laying down. It's obvious they know each other. The ethics of it, I was gonna say, not even the ethics of the military, but I mean, he obviously, to me, I don't think they ever come out and say it, but even with the hospital staff, like, he's obviously also has them under some sort of mind control, because from beginning to end, this entire issue, Charles is talking to these guys exactly like they would know each other for a long time. And he's like, thank goodness everyone will think we're complete strangers.
Well, it's kind of a beautiful scene when that general is talking to Xavier, and he says, I was one of the people who thought mutants were a menace, and now my opinion has changed, and anyone who says something like that, they're going to be red-faced now, because that's just not the case. And then Xavier's inner monologue is like, oh, this is why I released my mental hold on you. I'm like, you're doing to him, like, your students did more good with their selfless acts, and then here you are trying to like manipulate someone when they didn't need to be manipulated, and you're proving that other side point that mutants are harmful because you're invading someone's mind without consent and controlling them. But again, Professor Xavier is a jerk. The X-Men themselves, like, these teens are doing so much for mutants, and Xavier, instead of owning it, making sure he's a proper guiding force, he's just manipulating the government and the military and everything. So,
and there's an element, again, queer identity. I live in Utah. I work as a therapist with the queer community here, and there's a very predominant religion locally, and you have a lot of people like, oh, I met a gay person once and they weren't so bad. Like, you get a little bit of that from the military general, like, look, I met a nice mutant, maybe mutants are okay, I don't have to hate them anymore, which is it's exhausting. It's 2021, but this is 1963, so it's okay.
Exactly. It's the 60s. Like, I feel, again, once again, like, I think I said this on my episode with Trask, we know what comes later on is very problematic from their behaviors, but here I think that is a shift in mentality, and it is a good moral for 60s teenagers or 60s kids to be reading.
Yeah, as you kind of figure out how to go from being the other or the outcast to feeling accepted. We've got the X-Men being loaded into ambulances. One nurse says about Beast's foot, man, if this guy ever got an ingrown toenail, it'd be Endsville, which again is such a great one-liner. I adore how much affection is delivered toward Beast's toes consistently. When we flip the page, we get to see the destruction of the Sentinel base, which is quite impressive. Bolivar Trask's body is somewhere in there, along with Master Mold and all the defunct Sentinels. And then we move on to Iceman at the hospital, where they're realizing he's in a pretty serious state, but they actually can't do anything because he's in his ice form. So we have this doctor trying to help, but doesn't know what to do. Imagine being a medical professional treating a mutant. Clearly you need very specific specialists for each type of mutant. If you don't have, the future Beast or Dr. Cecilia Reyes, you're just kind of figuring it out as you go. But that's a tricky space for that doctor to be put in with a man that's changed into ice, who's in medical danger. When we get to the next page, we see Angel intercepting a phone call or checking in on the X-Mansion, and he realizes his parents are on their way to the school. And how do Angel and Professor X react?
flip the fuck out.
They're like, no one's at the school. What are we gonna do?
Like, what
Think of a lie. Do
are they
another lie.
afraid of? Like, I don't understand why they're so panicked. It's an empty school.
On this page, I'm particularly hung up on the sort of absurd ways the X-Men are trying to conceal their secret identities. I mean, we talked a bit already about sort of how ludicrous that is, but I love how Beast is like sitting in bed he appears to have his glasses on, right? Like over his mask. And they're talking about like, make sure you keep your mask on so you don't reveal your identity. And Angel like hovers in midair so that no one can see the number he's dialing on the phone and figure out the number of the mansion. It's a little farcical to me.
Yeah, because they don't have caller ID back then, right? Like there's no phone records that show the phone number afterward.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to circle back on Bobby in the hospital, like with his hand over his head. It's freaking adorable. Like, and he's here like, I'm the youngest member of the X-Men. I can't let them down. I'm like, oh, Bobby, you're so precious. Love you.
I was really worried about Bobby too, because I thought it was quite a shock seeing how like the opening panel, Bobby's just kind of like standing up and they're giving him like minor aid, and then all of a sudden he's just like in bed and he's in the worst shape of anyone, even though like no one said anything or he seemed fine. I was gonna say though, once we get to the panels with Angel flying and stuff, calling on the phone, I know the first thing when I was reading this page, I don't know if anyone else thought it, but I was like, if this isn't Reed Richards, it's definitely like his twin brother. I guess we're running out of concepts, I guess, of hair and faces.
We get this.
With the white temples.
Yeah, we get this man's name later. It's Dr. John Thomas, and I'm a big fan of the Gray Temples myself. He's quite handsome, if I do say so.
He's very handsome,
very distinguished.
It's a good look.
Good look. 3 issues ago, we saw Angel go home and visit his parents, and he sat down to dinner basically, and then got a call about the Sentinels and rushed away. So the parents were like, okay, bye. And now they're like, hey, we're coming to visit your school. So they're on their way to visit. I don't know why they don't just tell them like, hey, the students are off on a field trip or we're not home, but they try to find some excuse to not let them go. For those of us that are queer, did you ever panic that your friends would or your parents would find your porn stashed under your mattress, or they would find some sort of clue that you were gay? There's this like, oh no, they're gonna find out we're mutants if they get to the school. We gotta run home and hide everything really quick. I don't know. Anybody go through that?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, with little things too, like not necessarily porn, but like I liked Sailor Moon a lot back in the 90s. So like I would buy like a Sailor Moon doll and like I would hide it somewhere and be like, no, don't find it. So
far too many of us have been outed before our time. So we see Angel rushing home to intercept his parents before they can get there. And this is kind of the first time I think in the X-Men, we get this beautiful splash page of Kirby with Angel kind of flying and being his very best self. He's just talking about how free he feels and how wonderful it is to just like let his wings. Now this is a man that binds his wings down under his clothing constantly. So how wonderful to see him flying free. What did you guys think of this panel or this page?
It's pretty unusual for this era. Like you'd have opening page splashes pretty commonly, but fairly rare to see a splash page just smack in the middle of an issue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to me, like especially for this issue, this has always been like my favorite page out of this issue. I always love Kirby flexing. So I think it's good to see Angel, and like you said, especially a character that to me is almost hidden more than some of the other ones, especially have to go through binding and all that kind of stuff. It's great to, as you said, just be able to see him be himself and just fly.
And
It's
the
gorgeous.
perspective of the like tilted curved earth underneath him as he's flying is actually kind of great. It gives you like perspective from the air. I think it's fantastic.
It elucidates why Angel has such a beautiful, wonderful power, and why later on, when he loses his wings, why it was so devastating and so catastrophic. Because I mean, we have characters who can't control their powers, or more obvious than others, but Angel just has these wings and he can fly. And I'm thinking of the animated series where he thought it was more of a curse. I don't think historically in the comics he really viewed it as a curse, though. Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
From time to time, it depends on the writer. I think so often writers of Angel see him as like one of the weakest X-Men, and they're working so hard to power him up, to change him. But I love when writers just let him be like the flying X-Men, like he's so amazing in the air. When you can capture that in his character, and not focus on his riches, or I love Archangel, of course, which is a great character turn. But I love when they just let Angel be Angel.
But can we talk about his parents, though, in those panels where
Mhm.
Xavier's like, it's exam time? No. And they're like, oh, we just want to take a motor trip over. Like, we'll be just a few minutes. I'm like, you're literally going to take your motor trip and just go by your son's school and just be there for a few minutes? Like, stop. Get the hint, Worthingtons.
And these guys are billionaires. They're just out for a little Sunday drive. I get it. So Angel gets back to the school, and what happens?
Oh my.
Those beautiful blue
Traps.
eyes.
Traps.
Traps.
We get a purple glove opening the door, which is the first hint it's Magneto.
Mhm.
And what does Angel fly into when he gets inside?
Oh, an axe.
A flying metal axe through the air, and a dropping glass panel that he crashes into, which leaves him unconscious.
Poor Angel. Yeah.
I mean,
and then you see
yeah.
the silhouette.
Mm-hmm. Magneto's pissed. So there was a few issues back where Magneto did not know where the X-Men lived. I don't know exactly when he discovered the location of the mansion, but he's been here for a minute. He's been setting traps, laying down traps for each one. And, he gets them one by one. So there's this kind of creeping horror presence in the background, waiting for each of the X-Men to arrive so he can take them out.
Magneto basically turns into like Jigsaw in this issue.
Absolutely. Jigsaw from the movies, not the Punisher villain, right?
Yes. Yeah. Important clarification. Yeah.
Yes. For the Marvel fans out there who don't know their horror films. Are you a Jigsaw fan, Patrick?
I have a complex relationship with the Saw movies. I've seen them all. There are very few that I like and would wholeheartedly endorse to someone, but they hold a perverse fascination for me.
Here.
I don't think I've ever really explored the Saw movies, sidebar, but that's another one.
Yeah. I mean,
I think I saw them once or twice, like in college, but I never revisited them. It's definitely not on my Halloween watch list.
Watch the first one. The twist still slaps. Otherwise, they're not great.
The best kind of fascinations are perverse ones, though.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
In my opinion,
for sure.
I was gonna say the traps and Saw still might be better than Magneto's traps in this.
So we get back to the hospital where Cyclops is demonstrating to a doctor why it's a bad idea for him to take off his glasses. I will destroy you with my optic beams if I do so.
Good heavens.
And then Professor X, instead of just taking the whole team back, he just is like, why don't you and I, Cyclops, drive back to the mansion ourselves? I can't contact Angel, so let's figure out what's happening. So they get back and there's more traps laid out. Cerebro is screaming, and what does Magneto do to these two?
Oh, he attacks Xavier with what are those coils from Cerebro? It's hysterical.
It's the one type of weapon I cannot fight.
Yeah, it's like an anti-telepathy cable of some kind, which is gonna block his powers, and it is not the one type of weapon he cannot fight. We could provide a long list of technology that Xavier has no defense against, from bombs to guns to all kinds of things. But this is the one thing that he cannot fight.
And then he decks Cyclops.
Yeah, he traps Cyclops in a dark room, and Cyclops tries to kind of blast all around him, but Magneto can create shields, right? So then he just punches him in the face and knocks him out. So we've got 3 captured X-Men now, which is kind of amazing, I think. Any thoughts? Did you guys enjoy this brief battle between Cyclops and Professor X with Magneto?
I love how Magneto pulls the classic like walk into a glass window trick on Cyclops and just drops down a transparent shield. It dropped down between us, and he just runs right into it. Some of these traps are pretty silly.
Oh, the wires that get Professor X, they're called mechanical mental wave distorters.
Yes, there we go.
There you go.
I had to get the term down. I love Stan Lee's like big giant words to describe technology back then. Just ridiculous inventions across the Avengers and Thor and Captain America. All the old 60s comics have these just bizarre mechanical devices with huge names. It makes me happy.
I was gonna say, I like my my big thing, especially with like the Cyclops takedown, is this is like the one way I don't like Magneto, is like just kind of like this big oof. Like it's all he's doing is like, I'm just gonna like punch you in the face. It seems with most of these traps, they're kind of like the most un-Magneto way to do anything. And of course, like you had said before, like I guess in hindsight, I mean, the reader is still really relatively new to Magneto, so they don't have all this history with him. But yeah, I think going back on it, I'm just like, ugh. So Magneto, we're just gonna get the old like punch him in the face.
Well,
Magneto...
yeah, it's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say it's funny because Magneto obviously has, such an incredible power that he can do so much with. And for a lot of this issue, it's oddly as though Stan just kind of forgot Magneto's main power, because so much of the way he defeats the X-Men has nothing to do with his magnetism. And it's like, dude, you've got all this like right at your fingertips. Why are you doing all this like arcade shit, basically? You know?
Especially in the coming pages with Beast. It was like, really?
Yeah.
You took the time to do that to the floors, really?
My kids and I, my sons are 12 and 10, and we've been rewatching. They love it, but they hate it. We've been rewatching the old Batman series from the 60s. Just like one episode a week. And my 10-year-old is like incensed at the end of every episode. Like, he's like, so a cake exploded and the police had to call Batman, and then instead of just killing him, the villains like put him in a hot air balloon and with like a shark. Like, what the hell? Like, it's always these ridiculous like plots, and you can see a lot of that in 60s comics across the board. There's just this bizarre like level to the villainous plots. The Vanisher, as an example, back in issue 2, like he teleports into the bank and he's like, I'm coming back to rob you later, and then he teleports away. You're like, what? Just rob them. What's wrong with you? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, go ahead, Rowan.
Oh no, I was just gonna say too, like the second last panel on page 12, with the takedown of Cyclops, Magneto is holding a metal pipe and just like hits him with a metal pipe. Like the one,
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, like the one time like we could really just flex his powers, like you could just, mentally pick up this pipe and hit him with it. But now I'll just grab it and hit him with it.
He's clearly off his meds. There's something going on here.
Magneto.
Well, and you have to I guess sort of consider that era of comics in context too, because they were turning the crank. They were trying to put out a product on a very, very accelerated schedule. And you have to take into account, what degree of camp, along the lines of the Batman series that Chad was just talking about, can you factor in here, as well as just, Kirby did some layouts. I forget who the penciler is on this issue, but, by the old Marvel method, they just drew some stuff and Stan put words to it, and especially with these early issues, I feel like they weren't, putting the level of energy or care into it that they did with, you know, your
Yeah,
early
the
Spider-Man or Doctor Strange or whatever.
penciler here is Jack Kirby, and then who did the layouts, and then it's finished by Jay Gavin, which was a pseudonym for Werner Roth,
Oh, okay.
who does a lot of great work back then. We go to the next page, and this is saying something. If you've listened to our podcast, we've had a lot of conversations about sexism and the way Jean Grey is treated. This page, and I'm actually sad that Heather's not here because I would love to get her take. This is the most problematic page in the X-Men thus far as sexism goes. And keep in mind, Jean has been grabbed, she has been thrown, she has been called girl and female, but Beast here, oh my God, not okay. Hashtag me too, hashtag time's up. It is not all right the way that this has happened. So Beast is healed, which means he was either faking it or he has some sort of minor healing factor because his foot was broken, but now he's all better. He's bouncing all over the room like ADHD Beast, throwing huge words around. Jean comes in to check on him. She's worried about the teammates. And he says, I'm just going to quote a few of his words toward her directly. She says, "You're impossible." He says, I don't even know how to say this word.
Perspicacious.
Perspicacious of you, wench. He calls her wench. Then she twirls him around in the air to try to get him to calm down. And he says, "Prattle away then, female. You have my undivided attention." Shortly after that, she's worried about her teammates. And he says, "Just like a woman, if someone isn't fracturing your eardrums every conceivable minute, you begin to fear that something's amiss." Now, I know men like this in my real life that treat women in the workplace or at school just ridiculously, but Beast is so over the top here. Give me some of your reactions. I know we have some big Jean fans in the room. How do you feel here?
Well, I'm a huge Gene stan, but I fucking hate Beast more. So fuck you, Dr. Hank McCoy. I'm sorry, where did you get your PhD? No one knows. So A. B, he uses hyperbolic language instead of just talking to people one-on-one, because one would assume maybe he has no way of emotionally connecting with people. And this scene right here elucidates that. But I just think he's the worst. How do you talk to your teammate like that when she has valid concerns? You know, regardless of gender, Beast, you're supposed to be the smartest guy here. She's like, "I'm concerned about our teammates." It's like, just like a woman. Fuck off, Beast. Sorry.
No, he can fuck off. He can fuck right off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no Gene fan, but and it does, yeah, sorry. But it does
How do you mute someone? As a guest, how do I mute someone?
That's very Gene of you.
It's very Dark Phoenix of me.
It is, that's true. It takes a lot for me to feel sorry for Jean, but I feel sorry for Jean on a regular basis in early X-Men. I don't know. This is a weird page. I feel like, I don't know, Stan was having a bad day or something. I feel like Stan had some issues to work out that day. I mean, probably just in general, but especially when he was writing this page.
I think the idea, because it's such a progressive story, and like the issue I read, I mean, this is progressive for the time, but like the way Beast was talking to Jean in the issue I read, she was here like, "Thanks, Hank. I'm going to levitate myself up." I almost feel that like Stan is trying to elucidate the fact that what Beast is saying is wrong, and you can't talk to a woman like that. She can rise above it. But in this scene right here, I don't know where, I don't see the consequence. I don't see Jean one-upping him, other than later on she's the last to get captured. But I do think he is purposely being written as a douche and being problematic, if that makes sense. I think he is supposed to be written, and you're supposed to not like what he's saying, even in the 60s. Does that make sense?
I'm going to presume that right before this scene was written, Stan Lee tried to like make a pass at his secretary and she wasn't having it. And now he's taking it out from Beast on Jean here. But Jean does stand up for herself here, which is in the early issue she didn't do. She is standing up for herself. She's not taking it. Although she doesn't call him on it either, and she totally should.
I was going to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go. I can rant for hours about this.
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, I think this is a weird, just kind of weird page that, I don't know. I feel like Stan just has to have it in anything he writes. To me, when I read this, all I thought about was Fantastic Four, Stan Lee, Fantastic Four, which probably far more problematic because, I mean, Fantastic Four the early issues, Stan's got Reed like hitting Sue, and yeah, it's just this weird hang up that I find Stan always has this odd relationship with women that he writes, that he's always like has some sort of violence enacted on them. And I don't think he necessarily deserves the right, because I don't think he ever fully empowers them. Like, it doesn't do anything. And usually most of the time I was kind of surprised that this kind of just breezed by, because I know with Sue, with Fantastic Four, if something happens, usually she's quiet about it. Like, oh, I just got slapped, what did I do? And that's usually the Stan go-to. But
yeah. Oh, he's writing for boys. He's not writing for girls. He's putting a girl on each team, but Jean's being written for boys here, right? It's something interesting to consider. You got like white boys, white teenagers in the 60s is the target audience here. But still, it's very problematic and very uncomfortable. I almost want to see like a modern comic revisit this scene, and Jean being like, "Hey, do you remember that time you called me wench at the hospital? Fuck you." Like, I kind of want to see it, because in the last issue of X-Force, which just came out a few weeks ago, Beast is sitting and monologuing to himself about how people want the fun Beast back, but the world needs him to be a bastard. They need him to be the bastard so that he can protect mutants. And like, I feel like Benjamin Percy in that scene like is writing what we're all thinking, but Beast has been a bastard all along. When you take this scene, my God, he's terrible.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, they need to revisit this page and then have an editorial note that just says "See Dark Phoenix."
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Like, I would like to see this panel revisited, especially in X-Force, where Jean flat out says early on in the run, like, "Hank, don't ever fucking patronize me again." And, he's been doing this for a while. I didn't realize how problematic Beast was until I've been reading these issues for your podcast, Chad. I'm like, he really is a douche. I mean, before it was just fun hating him. Now I really fucking hate him.
Professor X is bossy, Angel is a little grabby, but Beast is an outright asshole, like so often to Jean, and he keeps grabbing everybody. All right, anyway, so Jean and Marvel Girl and Beast then rush back to the mansion. We see Jean using her powers to levitate some more, which is great. That's something she learned just a couple of issues ago. And tell me about the traps Magneto has laid out for these two. It's ridiculous.
Well, can we talk about the moment where he jumps out the window and she follows him out the window and then seemingly realizes in midair that she can float herself down using her telekinesis? That cracked me up.
I forgot.
That cracked me up. Of course, I forgot. I can float myself down gently by means of my power of levitation while you have already jumped out a window. Amazing.
Maybe she thought Beast would catch her.
Yeah.
So what traps did Magneto lay for these two?
He waxed the floor. He
This
waxed
is my favorite
the floor.
one.
He waxed the floor. Like, literally, the master of magnetism waxed the floor. Like, come on.
Not just the floor, but the walls and ceilings.
The walls.
Also.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Everything. So Beast can't be agile.
He got a big giant truck full of Vaseline and just wiped it down all over the hall so the Beast would slide into a wall when he gets inside.
He got it from a stranger.
When I saw this trap, I like to I was giggling because I like to imagine like all the prep time and Magneto coming in beforehand, and he's just like, I gotta do the floors and the wall. And I'm just gonna assume he did the ceiling too. Like, why leave a job undone?
Oh my God, I want like a flashback issue now where it just focuses on Magneto's prep work for this and his inner thoughts as he's setting all this up.
Oh, so delicious. And then Jean, what's the trap for Jean?
Kind of a rehash almost of Cyclops. Like, we get her like trapped again with the doors close on Beast. So they trap her from that side.
There's sleepy gas.
And then
The
sleeping
sleepy
gas.
gas
He gasses
comes
her.
in.
Like literally, you see like a whiff of this bat gas, and you're gonna go to bed now, Marvel girl.
Yeah, it's so delightful. My favorite thing about the 60s is these elaborate, ridiculous, like villain schemes. It makes me so happy. We go back to the hospital. We see the doctor's super worried about Iceman, and he is getting a new experimental drug to try to take care of him. I adore how much effort the doctor's putting into protecting Iceman here. The media come in and they're asking all kinds of questions, and he basically tells them to fuck off. They threaten him, like, what would our readers think? He's like, I don't give a shit what your readers think. I've got my work to do. So I kind of love the doctor here. I think he's amazing.
I mean, even though I bristled at his treatment of the media as a journalist myself, I do have to say, I think Dr. John Thomas may be the secret hero of this issue.
Mm-hmm. Although,
The
you
MVP.
know, media, I'm all for media as well, but they're like trying to blackmail and guilt him into getting the
Yeah.
story. So they kind of deserved it.
They are not acting ethically.
And then we jump back to Magneto, who literally could just murder his foes right here. He could do all kinds of things, but what does he choose to do of all things? Speaking of 1960s Batman ridiculousness.
He puts them in a hot air balloon in like a little capsule and like bye-bye, and they float away.
He puts them in a steel gondola and lets them drift into the atmosphere where they can choke to death. Or suffocate to death. I mean, he could even like shoot it into space, right? Like he could shoot, but he just lets it like drift away. It's almost like he's toying with them a little bit. He wants to see how far he can push their limits. I don't know. It's a ridiculous plot. Less ridiculous than a Vaseline hallway, but still.
I have to say I loved it. I realized I've been talking mad shit on most of Magneto's traps so far, but I love this hot air balloon. It's such a goofy concept. It's memorable. Like I read this fairly recently, and this was the main thing that stuck in my memory from this issue and this storyline was this crazy steel gondola attached to a hot air balloon. It's delightful.
Then we finally have the Worthingtons arriving at the school. They knock knock, and there is a crazy man dressed in a helmet and cape and purple and purple and red standing inside. What do you guys? So we get another splash page. What do you guys think of the Magneto's like full on Quasimodo on this final page? Like, what happened to his face here? He says. They say, "Who are you?" He says, "I am power. Men call me Magneto." I don't know. What are your thoughts on the conclusion?
I think boyfriend just got back from space and he's a little deranged.
Yeah, he's got full on crazy eyes. I actually love this rendition of him. He looks scary and he's towering over the Worthingtons. I thought it was a pretty impactful cliffhanger. Yeah,
agreed. I think it's really scary. These two human parents don't know what they're walking into.
Speaking of the human parents, I love how they're driving over there and they're like, we really miss Warren. And they're talking about like, oh, how does Xavier afford the school with such little kids? I'm like, you guys are very wealthy, well-to-do parents. Why aren't you suggesting you'll donate? Why didn't you investigate the school a little bit more? I don't know the back history of how Angel's parents let him go. I think I read Angel Revelations, which came back out decades later, but I was like, wow, these parents are just so oblivious.
You got to presume that Xavier just fucked with their brains.
Yeah.
Like, give me your money, but he has his own wealth too. He's a very rich man. But the Worthingtons are described as like the 5th richest people on the planet at one point. Like they have quite a bit of money. But yeah, if there's only 5 students in the school, I'd be wondering the same thing, frankly.
When in doubt, assume Xavier fucked with somebody's brain. It's always a safe bet.
So as we conclude, we have this giant cliffhanger of the parents of Angel being held by Magneto. When we look at the next cover, give me some of your preliminary thoughts as you look at the cover for X-Men 18 next time.
I love that they foreshadowed with Iceman, him saying like, oh, I'm the youngest, I need to save them, I need to, when he was asleep. That was some nice foreshadowing. They laid the plot for the next issue.
Mm-hmm. And Iceman really hasn't had a lot of airtime across the series. So for him to take center stage next issue is fantastic. It looks like Magneto's severed the heads of the X-Men and hung them on the wall.
Oh.
Yeah, it does.
He also has incredible flashlight powers.
I always love, I mean, it's a comics trope that's been done so many times, but I always love when a villain takes out the entire team except for one member, and then it's down to that one member to save the day. I always love that trope. And yeah, that alone, I mean, even though I did read that issue recently, still makes me excited about the conclusion of the story.
Yeah. Rowan, you being the horror expert among us, how does this issue stand up as a suspense or horror build for a 1960s comic book?
I mean, to me, this is a horror comedy, just due to the ridiculousness of the traps. You know, for the 60s, I think you kind of, hit the nail on the head. You were talking about the 60s Batman, and this kind of really gives me those feels where it's just, I wouldn't say necessarily suspense, but it's kind of funny, and the traps, even though they're lame, they just have kind of laughable conclusions. But I think with the final splash page, and then if you tie it in with the next cover, I just to respond to the question with the cliffhanger, I think it was a pretty effective cliffhanger because, like you said, at this point in time, Magneto was kind of out of the picture. So, people, what did you estimate? Like over a year. So that, I'm thinking for, young teenage boys, Magneto's probably out of their mind. They're not thinking about him. So it's a pretty good cliffhanger ending. It's just a shame we couldn't get something that meaty in the middle.
Patrick, how about your thoughts? How does this stand up as a horror book?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would sort of echo what Rowan said. I mean, obviously I've been laughing at the traps a bit along the way. But yeah, I like that final splash page. As I said, it communicates a lot of menace, which most of the book up until that point doesn't. And, I mean, another trope that I do enjoy is the villain taking out everybody with well-planned traps. So there was some enjoyment to that for me. Just again, they were rather silly and seemed like a misuse of Magneto's
I mean,
powers.
the title itself is "And None Shall Survive," right? Like you're setting in, it's scary. So in conclusion, tell me what your very single favorite moment in this comic book was, and who was your star player in today's issue? My star player today, I think, was Magneto. I adore just his sheer fuckery, like the ridiculousness of all of his actions. He gets even more extra in the next issue. He's just all ranty and ravey. But the Vaseline hallway has to be my single favorite moment in this issue. If I have to choose just one, it's just fantastic. How much for you guys?
I mean, I said it already, but Dr. John Thomas, I think, kind of saves the day, especially because he's taking care of Iceman. He's keeping Iceman in fighting shape to save the day next issue. So that's important. And as far as my favorite moment, I still love that the balloon just descending into the sky. I love how it slowly fades over the course of, I think, 3 panels. It is such a silly moment, but also it is a little spooky and a little unnerving to just watch the X-Men float away in this prison.
Yeah, fair.
I was gonna say, probably just because of the chuckle I got out of it. My favorite scene was definitely Magneto hitting them with the pipe. That one I got a really good laugh out of. I'm gonna do a zig for the who wins it. I think the winner of the issue is the parents. It doesn't matter what Charles wants. They got to go on their drive and no one was stopping them. I like this willpower.
We are white billionaires and no one will tell us what to
do. I mean, Charles really could have just, done what he does to everyone else in the universe, which is just control them and control their minds. But you can't stop them. They're multi-billionaires.
How about for you, Dayspring?
My favorite scene was Hank McCoy slipping on the wax floor, wax walls, everything, anywhere, anytime that Beast falls flat on his face, I'm happy. My MVP is going to be the general. I thought what he said was really great. I think it gave a lesson to, kids in the 60s, little boys in the 60s, especially when it says all those people who called the X-Men menaces to society will have a lot of apologizing to do. In fact, I myself used to fear their power until I saw how they risked their lives to help us all. So I really thought that was just like a nice little message. And I like, again, like with Trust, like these normal humans who see the X-Men and they're like, no, these are mutants, are using their powers to help us. I really do like that idea for the 60s and for readers to inhale that as kids.
We'll be back next week with If Iceman Should Fail, when we continue the battle. Will the X-Men drift into space and asphyxiate? Tune in next week, same X time, same X channel. There's a Batman reference for everybody. What a pleasure to hang out with you guys this afternoon. Where can people find you on social media, either you or your podcasts and work?
I'm at Neverending X-Men if you want to follow my journey through all the X-Men comics. And if you want to check out my horror movie podcast, Every Horror Movie on Netflix, that's at EHMON Cast for Every Horror Movie on Netflix Cast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And it's really fun, actually. I listened to a few of your episodes last week. It's
awesome. Thank you.
And for me, our podcast is the It Slays podcast. If you search it in anything, we're on everything. And then on Instagram, I was gonna say I'm Biggie Halls on Instagram, and every once in a while I post some cool comic stuff I pick up. And that's pretty much it.
I'm at Power of X-Men on Instagram. We just had Namor Cosplay do an Instagram takeover. So if you see photos of a very handsome man in Namor cosplay, that is not me. But we're somewhat active on Twitter. It depends on my mood, but you can find the podcast on YouTube and all podcast platforms at Power of X-Men.
Well, I'm going to go find an old 80s scary movie to watch tonight, and I look forward to collaborating with you guys again soon. Thank you so much for being here. Graymalkin Lane can be found at Graymalkin P for podcast on Twitter, or Graymalkin Lane on Instagram. We will see you guys back here next week, and thank you so much for being with us. Have a good day, guys.
Absolutely.
Okay, bye.
Bye.